Beep. Hey, Nick's Bible here. He's not reading me right now because he's too busy telling his neighbor how much he enjoys living next to her with a megaphone. I know no one else thinks you're pretty, but I think you're pretty because to me, beauty's on the inside, and I just want to let you know that. If he would have made time to read me, he probably would have read Proverbs 27:14, which clearly states that if a man loudly blesses his neighbor early in the morning, it's taken as a curse. Look at it this way. Since Nick here will be in the hospital for a few days, I'm sure he'll find plenty of time to read me, and find other passages that are also helpful.
The Bible. Truth delivered.
He's on the wrestling team.
Hi, I'm Daniel. We're in a series looking at conflict. Today we're going to be focusing on authority figures. You know, teachers, coaches, police, people who can sometimes seem to loom over us. But what does the Bible have to say about authority? Let's listen to some students share their stories about conflict with authority, and then Doug Fields will give us the biblical perspective on authority in our lives.
Last year, I was the freshman, like the star freshman. If I ever missed a track meet, they'd be like, CT, where you was at during the mile? We needed you. I had a coach, and he would run with us, and it got to the point where I'd be racing our coach, and pretty soon I just became faster than him. All that changed when we got the new coach. It honestly seemed like they just pulled him out of a hat. At first sight, you wouldn't think he knew what he was doing, because he about literally 300 pounds probably. And we got out to practice the first day, and instead of, I'm thinking we finna go out there and he gonna be like, go out there, run 2 miles, run a mile, we gonna see what your time is and see how you do. He tells us to run sprints and stuff, and I'm like, okay, I don't get how that's gonna help us. It was kind of difficult to start off running for a guy that would coach you as he was running right next to you, to being pushed by a big guy on the sidelines with a whistle. I mean, it's not that I didn't want to run because he was telling me what to do. I just didn't feel like he knew what he was doing, because if he did, then maybe he wouldn't be as big as he was. I could respect somebody better if you telling me to do something and I can actually see you do it too. They say that you should respect authority, but I feel like authority should gain my respect. If I know for a fact that I'm right and I know that you don't know what you're talking about, and I'm gonna argue about it so I can see the dumb look on your face when you see that you're wrong. And that's like the prize for me right there, because I love that. I love seeing when people are wrong, and I love it when they know that they're wrong. I think the reason he doesn't like me is because he feels like I'm trying to take position as distance leader, and he feels like I'm trying to take his spot. And whenever I contradict every question that he asks, I think that kind of like ticks him off.
Now, I know I'm a pretty old guy, but I can still remember how frustrating it was to be a teenager. I remember how annoying it was to feel like no one would ever really listen to me because I was just a teenager, and how sometimes the people in authority over me were often really hard to respect. But the problem is that the Bible makes it really clear that we're supposed to respect the people God places in authority over us, even when they're people who are hard to respect. As a matter of fact, Romans 13:1 says, "For all authority comes from God, and those in positions of authority have been placed there by God." Now, this verse says God actually put people in authority over us that we're supposed to respect. So the question we gotta ask ourselves is this: am I willing to believe that God's way is the best way to respect other people, even when it doesn't seem to make sense? I mean, this is a great question to think about, because sometimes God's ways seem to contradict what feels right to us. Cameron said that at one point that he doesn't think his coach doesn't like him because of Cameron's ambition to be a great runner. But right before that, Cameron was talking about how much he enjoys proving other people wrong. And I kind of laughed when I watched it, but I'm just gonna really be honest with you right now. That kind of attitude is just really difficult to respond positively to. The truth is that whether Cameron is right in everything he thinks, like whether his coach really doesn't know what he's doing and Cameron really does know better, Cameron's abrasive attitude is gonna make it so his coach never wants to listen to him. And the reason why I think God's command to respect authority is so wise is because you and I can almost never determine who's in a position of power over us. I mean, I know I still can. I've been around a long time. But what we can do is decide how we're going to react to people of authority. Are we going to respond to them calmly and humbly? Are we going to show them respect and do what they ask as best as we can? And if so, you become the kind of person that others want to listen to. You see, we become influential by being respectful.
My teacher in 8th grade, he was really nice at first. He was my favorite teacher. It was at a new school, so I didn't really know everybody. Everything was good, and then about halfway into the year, we just got into an argument. I don't remember what it was about or anything, but he, from then on, just completely did not like me. There was one time that I was just like, all right, I agree with you. It's my fault. And that didn't work because he thought I was being sarcastic. I've tried just not talking in his class and doing my work, but if I didn't talk, I wasn't interacting with everybody, so nothing that I do for him is ever gonna be good enough, so I might as well not try in his class. He's very self-centered. Everything's his way or the highway, even over the principals. Whenever he's teaching, he does not like it for you to ask to go to the bathroom. Don't even raise your hand or anything. So one day I was like, hey, can I use the restroom? And he was like, nope. That whole time that he was speaking, I was like, kept on raising my hand. I was like, can I please go to the restroom? I ended up going to the office for that, for disrespect. The efforts that I put forth haven't worked, so there's really nothing else that I can do. I've tried every different angle to work with him to get him to not hate me, but it still doesn't work.
You know, conflicts with teachers can just be difficult. You see, the reality is that if stuff like this happens, we can't control other people's actions. I mean, I wish I could, but I can't. I can hardly control my own actions. And when we have issues with someone who is in a position of authority, whether it be a teacher or a coach or a parent, we can often forget that a calm, kind, caring tone can get us a lot farther than a negative one. You know, my mom used to tell me that it's easier to catch flies with honey than to catch them with vinegar. And while I never really understood that, why somebody would be in the business of catching flies, I understood what she was getting at. That honey, kind of being kind and sweet and caring, is gonna go a lot farther than being vinegar or being nasty. It's just common sense. So anytime you can take ownership for your part of a tension or a conflict, things are gonna go better. You know, when I own my piece of the pain and the conflict and say something like, hey, I know I contributed to this tension, it can lead to being more peaceful, and I'm less defensive. So when you and I are willing to acknowledge that there may have been a time, I overreacted, or I spoke in anger, or you're right, I was sarcastic, that teacher or that coach or that person in authority, they may be willing to move beyond their own past attitudes and be more open to pursuing peace. And honestly, you know what? Maybe they won't. I mean, teachers are people too, and they can be emotional and irrational just like you and me. But it's important to remember that even when we feel wronged or we feel like we've been treated unfairly, as a follower of Jesus, we've got to respond with respect toward adults.
Probably a time that I have trouble with authority is probably just one day I was just out in the parking lot, with friends skating around, and a cop just pulled up and started being a jerk to all of us. And, I kind of have a smart mouth, and I tend to get smart with people, and that means I pretty much get angry, and the cop just started being a jerk. And I told him, you don't have to come around here and start being a jerk to us. You could have just told us to leave. And he threatened to arrest me, and I said, you can't arrest me for doing anything. So he pretty much put me in handcuffs and put me in the car and took me home. And whenever I got home, I started to cuss him out. And he said that he better not find me doing anything wrong or anything, because if not, he's not going to even say anything. He's just going to take me straight to jail next time. I do struggle with police often whenever I'm skating. You know, mostly everywhere you skate there, you know, you're not allowed to. So that, you know, and they don't warn you or nothing, just the cops come up there. There is a few cops that'll be nice about it and just say, hey, I don't mind you skating, but you know, there are a few cops that just come up there and just start being mean for no reason. You know, we didn't do nothing wrong. You know, I understand, you know, they have a job to do, but sometimes you don't have to just come up and be jerks about, you know, and just start yelling for no reason.
I'm sure Rico has learned that, you know, laws are not put in place to spoil the fun. They're just there to promote safety. And I know that's a tough thing to embrace, but imagine if we lived in a world that had no laws. I mean, it might be fun for an hour until someone infringed on your freedom because there was no rules to stop that person from hurting you. See, when you're in pain, you want rules to stop the pain. And things like theft and trespassing and traffic laws, you know, they're all in place for a reason. As easy as it is to be upset by the policeman who kicks you out of the park and keeps you from, you know, loitering and hanging out in front of the movie theater, you have to remember that law enforcement is just doing his or her job. I mean, Rico said it himself. They're doing their best to keep the area protected and keep you or the stranger you crash into on your skateboard from having to visit the hospital. You know, oftentimes how you and I respond to laws like these, and maybe those we don't understand or even agree with, how we respond is really a reflection or a sign of our character and our growth and our maturity as a follower of Jesus. The Bible talks about respecting people who have been placed in positions of authority over us, like government and, you know, public safety, and even people like teachers and coaches. There's a certain order of authority that needs to be followed so chaos doesn't happen. And order is actually part of God's plan. If you go back to the very beginning of the Bible in Genesis 1, it says, you know, God said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, over all the creatures that move along the ground. Now, this is really where order began. You know, also learning to practice respect now. Even when you think someone might not deserve the respect, that's a sign of obedience, and it's really a sign of a right relationship with God. God desires us to be respectful to those in leadership over us. And I can tell you that the more you respect other people, it will eventually come back to bless you, and you will gain respect from other people in the long run. Respect is one of those things that you get far in life, and it's gonna open doors for opportunities for you, and God's gonna move in and help you live a life that He dreamt you to live.
After watching those stories and listening to Doug, I think the biggest takeaway is respect. It makes biblical and practical sense to respect the authority in our lives. Check out this story with Brett and Alex Harris. As teenagers, they wrote a popular book called Do Hard Things that challenges our generation to live to their fullest potential.
Brett and I are twins. We've grown up doing pretty much all the same things together. Now we're at college and we're roommates. We travel together, we wrote a book together, we speak together, we're doing this interview together, and all of that has just been an incredible blessing.
If one of us gets off track, we can have that accountability. We can encourage, challenge one another, iron sharpening iron.
It all started when we were 16. And our father had just given us this big stack of books to read that summer. And one of the books we read was talking about young people in countries like China and India and how they're really applying themselves and preparing themselves, and then contrasting that with American young people and how we're complacent and we have an entitlement mentality and we're apathetic.
We're expected to be immature, irresponsible, rebellious, just because we happen to fall in between the age of 13 and 19 years old.
And so our desire was someone needs to be addressing this view of the teen years as a vacation from responsibility. And so being 16, wanting to get a message out to the whole world, we did what any 16-year-old would do, and we started a blog. We're challenging young people to prepare themselves, to challenge themselves, to stretch themselves, to step outside their comfort zone, because that's the way that you really experience growth. The three pillars of the revolution, as we refer to them, are character, competence, and collaboration.
It's embracing this calling on my life that God has for me, a calling that starts now, not after graduation, not after college, not after I'm married with kids, but right now as a teenager. God wants to use me And for me to follow him means not just, avoiding all the don'ts, but doing those great big things that he has called me to do.
It's inspiring to hear their passion and to see the impact they're having across the country. We'll see you next time.